Hey everybody, Swiggles or Row here, and this is my Reaper tutorial. Before we get completely started, I want to stress that this is not a formal tutorial on how to use digital audio workstations in general, and this alone is not a tutorial meant just to show what Reaper can do. I'm not an expert. This is a specific tutorial of mine for specific people who want to try out this DAW instead of another one, and I think this is going to be helpful for you guys and all my video game covering people who want a pretty cool, stable, more powerful DAW. So that being said, let's get started. Included in the download, which I highly recommend you guys check out, is my template for this tutorial, and if you open that up you should see this. I would have given you my actual template that I use for covers, but not only is it always changing, but I use so many different VSTs that I pretty much have to assume not everyone will have. You'd get a bunch of error messages. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that Reaper is up to your liking. So we're going to go to the preferences. So what we want to look at first is a very important stage, device. So your audio device needs to be set, as well as the audio plugin. Now I'm using Wave Out. A lot of people will use ASIO, and you generally just want to pick the one that's going to work best. If you're going from one DAW to another, stick to the same one if you can help it, because the drivers haven't changed, just the software we're using. So I'm going to use Wave Out. I end up having a little bit of lag, but because I can hear myself during recording in real time, there's no real problem here. So the next thing I want to do is make sure that my input device is my audio interface. Right now it's my microphone. That's fine for now. I'm not going to be recording any guitars today. I'm going to make sure my output device is speakers so that you guys can hear all the audio. You can make this your interface if you have an output jack and you want to route that to speakers or monitors. Now the sample format, I'm choosing 16-bit. Theoretically I can go up to 24 for my microphone, but this is an audible difference to where I can justify it, and I don't believe my guitar interface is going to really support 24, and it's pretty much fine for here. Sample rate, we're going to do 44,100 Hertz. This is CD standard, which is fine. Input channels, we got stereo 2, output stereo 2. Now this buffer, I have not changed this. You want to keep it higher if you're going to be running a lot of plugins, but during recording you want less latency. But as I've told you guys, I accept the latency and scooch it around a little just because I can monitor in real time, and it's not a big deal, and I definitely have a lot of VSTs and plugins and stuff going on. Alright, moving on. Another pit stop we need to make is to make sure our VSTs, such as synths, keyboards, Superior Drummer, Easy Drummer, all of that stuff is going to be checked in. So what you want to do is put whichever path you have, and you can add more, and it'll be smart and add more, or you can use a semicolon and space out the addresses. I have a folder called VST, and I have a folder called VST plugins. You might have different ones, so make sure that yours are the right ones for your computer and not just copied and pasted. Now the last part I needed to go over to make myself feel perfectly at home with Reaper is going to the editing behavior and going to mouse modifiers. Now when I went to MIDI note, I wanted to make sure that that when I left clicked, I would be able to select or add a note just as a default action. So what I did here is go to context, MIDI note, or MIDI piano roll also has this function, and then I wanted to make sure that left clicking would create a note. And you can change a lot of this stuff here and play along, but that's exactly how I like it and how I got used to it. You can also make it double click, which is the default, but I like single click. Now that we've got our preferences in store, let's look at this crazy template that I made for you guys. Now what a template is in general is just a canvas with some placeholders so that we don't have to worry about creating it. But I also want to show you why I made the things I did, what you guys need to do to actually record with this and make music, and maybe some ideas that you guys can use for bigger and different kind of templates that you can use. So I'm going to go down the list. We have drums, which unfortunately I have to program with various software. So this is a MIDI. or virtual instrument track. You can make this by clicking insert virtual instrument on new track, and then it'll prompt you which virtual instrument you want to use. I took out the one I have so that you guys could download it and put in your own, be it Easy Drummer, Steven Slade, or Addicted Drums, or whatever. Now this is a MIDI track, but right now we can open it up and we can still do everything that we can do with the other tracks as well, such as panning. We can add more effects, including the same effect that'll allow us to make it Superior Drummer or Easy Drummer. So all I did there was just add it from the list, and it gave me my crazy one by default. So I'll have to load up my usual. There we go. That might have been very loud. We can also add in all of our other effects here, but I'll talk about that later. Right now I just want to go over the template. So next we have a lead sub. Now these submixes are also receives. Some people use the term buses, and essentially what they are is a single track that collects more tracks beneath it. So if I open it up using this little triangle, we have a drop down with little individualized tracks. Now if I wanted to record guitar or lead guitar, which will contain melodies, guitar solos, all I have to do is click this record arm, and then it'll get ready to record whatever device it's in. Right now it's my microphone, but you can imagine there's a guitar there. Now how this is actually going to work is once I record a track here, this audio signal is actually going into the lead sub, almost as if they were a bunch of boxes. After all, the software is just emulating the physical thing. So if you click this I/O, this is an input-output. You can see I put two receives. Now one receive is coming from lead 1, and we can adjust how much of it comes in, just like volume. And I'd prefer to do it here, but you can do it all here as well, all the fading. So I have a receive here for lead 1 and a receive for lead 2. Now if I wanted 3 guitars, all I'd have to do is just click insert new track. Maybe I'd scooch it in. There we go. We could call it lead 3. And if I just recorded like that, it's not going to get collected here. And I'll explain why that's important in a second. So all we have to do is add new receive and there. Now why is this important? Having submixes is not only a more organized way to do stuff, and organization is pretty much how I do everything much faster than just going about it without knowing what I want to do. But also, if I wanted to mix the leads, say I think the first lead should be louder than the second, and the second one's going to be a harmony, then we can reduce it here. But say I think the leads in general are all too loud, then I can just drop it like this, and when compared to maybe the rhythm or the bass, we can properly mix all of them together because they're different parts in a uniform way. That's why it's important to mix within here and then on top here, sometimes even go back and forth a little. It's a huge process, and making submixes is just part of the organization. Now I have a rhythm submix here where we have 2 rhythm guitars, and I've already panned them hard left and hard right. This is implying that we're going to make some sort of metal or rock mix, but you can always mess around with everything. I usually would have just added equalizer on each side, as well as maybe a compressor on top, but you can mix and match to your heart's desire. You can also add more tracks. A lot of people like quad tracking. You can do more, who knows. And the same exact deal going up here is going on in every other submix. So now we have a bass submix, and I gave a bass and I gave a distorted bass track. You could probably mess around with the kinds of bass tracks you do. I sometimes like to have a separate track for slap bass, just so I can pop out the higher frequencies, and sometimes you get a better sound out of that. But it's all really up to you. Last, I have a synth submix, and this was a little bit of a tricky wildcard area. While not all the time I use synths, I decided to put one here anyway, and it's just like the other ones. You can mix and match, and you can use Contact or whatever keyboard you like. Now let's get on to how we're actually going to use this template for ourselves. So let's go ahead and get the drum started. So all we did here was click add, and then we were prompted in this huge list, and let's go over this list actually. So in all plugins, we can type in here and filter out our results. I have a ton of VSTs from a ton of different sources and downloads, and sometimes it's kind of crazy. So if I just want to type in, Superior, then we're going to get our nice Superior Drummer 2. And that's when we can play around with it, just like we already know how to. And if you guys want more information on how I mix my drums, you can check out my drum tutorial on the same channel. Now that we have our drums ready to go, oh my god, that scared the crap out of me. And I'm totally leaving that in. Alright, so now that we have our drums in, there's a lot of other random stuff that we can sort of play with. So the one thing I want to show you guys how to do is make an effects chain. Now to do that, all we have to do is type in a couple of the things that we like. So I'm going to use my FabFilter Pro Q VST, an equalizer that's pretty nifty, and I don't think we really want to mess with that right now before, so let's click it on clean. Now I also want to add a compressor, so let's take Pro C, my favorite compressor, and now we're going to go to effects and we're going to click save effects chain. Let's call it drum chain. Now the drum chain is going to contain everything in this list in this order, which is also a very, very important detail, because if I put this last, then it's not actually doing anything. And if this were not MIDI, if this were like guitar rig or something, then you'd be getting a signal, a guitar signal dry, and then compressing it and equalizing it, and then putting a signal on top of it. It's not going to sound the same, and it's definitely not going to get the sound that you were probably expecting. Now that we have our drum set up, let's look at some of our guitar tracks and what we can do there. So if I open up my lead subs, we're gonna play with Guitar Rig, but if you wanted to use Pod Farm or Amplitude or any sort of live software, all you'd really have to do is click it, turn it on, and you'd be able to record right there. But unfortunately, I use Guitar Rig, and that means we're gonna have to open up a VST. It'll work like an effect. Basically, we put the effect first before anything else because we want to process the signal as if it were going through an amp, and then we want to modify it later with equalizers, compressors, or any other effects that you have in mind. So I'm going to go to, say, my lead guitar tones, and I will say I've actually made all of these. I'm quite proud. And let's click on my Mesa lead tone. So now, and I won't demonstrate here, but maybe in a future tutorial, all I have to do is record anything, and maybe I can just show you with my voice. And talking right now, so if I reduce this very low, because this might sound terrible. And talking right now. Actually, that's pretty cool. Huh, who knew? I might use that in some future cover. Anyway, so now we have a dry signal that you can look at here, and it's not going to look very loud, but you're going to see in the meter here, and talking right now. It's still quiet because I dropped it, but it's a processed signal here. So all we really had to do is throw your VST or effect, your favorite one, and there you go. Now, some of you guys might be wondering, well, maybe I want to do this really fast. And I definitely don't always do this, but we can take our lead sub, which basically is receiving all these lead tracks and sending them out, and we can send them out with a cool effect. And they're all going to take on this effect. So if you want to save time and just EQ them all the same way, which maybe for a hi-fi project you don't want to do, then go ahead and make some presets. Make some presets for your leads. And talking right now. And you're going to save some time just by throwing this on top. But remember, you want to make sure your inputs and outputs, or at least your receives, they're all here. Otherwise, you're going to notice that, say if we mute this, it'll mute maybe a couple of them, but if this guy's not receiving from, say, lead 3, then lead 3 is still going to be live, and you're going to be able to hear it, and that's going to be a problem for you. Now we can do the exact same thing for our rhythm sub, so there's not really too much to go over there. And I'm still talking about, and the same will go for our bass sub, though we might want to add some fuzz or something, and unfortunately, the best way to do this is the built-in Reaper one, so I usually just do that, make it stereo, and add a bit of the wet mix and, you know, drop the volume. But I know that making an effect in Guitar Rig that's a distorted bass guitar and maybe tracking it twice would be just as good. Now the same will go for the synths, but I just want to show you guys how that works. So let's pull out, and we'll pull out the FabFilter 1. So unfortunately I haven't found a better way to do this. So what I'm going to show you guys right now is how to record MIDI. And I'll explain some of that recording procedure. But basically, this is how we've set up. So right now I have this option on called snapping. If you right click it, you can see there's some options here. This is where your snapping or aligning things automatically tool will go. So you generally want to have it not too high. And I've had snapping probably on 1/4 or 1/8 the whole time. Do not get cocky and put it higher. Sometimes if things are out of shape, I just turn off snapping and line it up manually. But if you're still learning how to use a DAW properly and get things to sound right on time, try to avoid it. Now all we have to do is double click here and we're going to get our MIDI table. Now we have our piano roll MIDI editor. So when I click down, and remember that I said I wanted to click once, not twice. So you guys, if you didn't change that, have to click twice. When I click down, it's going to set a velocity, and unfortunately I haven't nailed why it does it randomly, but it's alright because I edit all the velocities semi-manually later. So this is basically how the MIDI editor is going to work. We have all these cut up lines, and I've taught how to program drums in my other tutorial, and that essentially covers how to program MIDI in general. So hopefully you guys know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. We have a 1/8 snapping, we have straight. Now there are some other ways you can program, especially if you come into different sort of songs. So while we have a cute little song now, but we could also make it have a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. And if you understand what the music concept of triplet is, you'll understand exactly what I'm doing right now. So it's the same exact timing, you know, like one measure. We haven't changed the tempo, but we're writing different notes. Now, at the bottom, you're going to see the bars for velocity here. You can select them all by holding right mouse and drag it out. And then we can all, we can sort of manually make them high, we can make them low, whatever we want. And we can actually adjust different qualities of these notes, such as pitch, pressure, expression, breath, but usually you probably want to go for velocity. So one thing I like to do to make things realistic, we can click Humanize in the edit bar, and then we can adjust the timing a little from 100% off to, you know, maybe a little. And then the velocity, we can go up or down. I usually like to keep it pretty fresh. I haven't gotten down what timing bias is. I believe that's the direction that the timing will shift it. So now it sounds a little bit better. Of course, this is, you know, a terrible, terrible example. Now there's a couple other things we can work out, the nuances. So if you drag the edge of your MIDI loops, you're gonna start seeing, it'll stretch out. And this one's not exactly even. So let's see why that is. If you go back and you see it, you're gonna see this little bar. I call that like the loop bar because it's basically setting where to loop again. So if I stretch it back out, now everything's even. And if we press the hotkey S, we can cut. So maybe I wanna change it up a little the second time around. So quick fix, and that's kind of the sort of things I really want to teach the most. We can do Control-Shift-G or right click and glue items, and now we have this big thing. And then maybe I want to change the last note. So that's kind of a easy way to do, you know, drum fills or something. You know, don't take 5 hours to do drums, take 2 hours because you use the hotkeys that I taught you. You can also do a lot of Windows-based hotkeys. So if I hold Shift after selecting the first part and then click the last one, I can move all of these guys in series. Now there are going to be times where things are kind of messing with you a lot. So let's just see an example. Like say I want to make this measure a bit longer. see what I'm doing. I'm dragging it out, but now you can see a looped side. So if I added something here, it's going to show up there. We don't want that, so we're going to move our little loop bar over, and now we're going to make it. So now we have 1, 2, 3 measures before it loops again. Alright, for live recording, now we're going to quickly go over some of the setup you want for your project and how we're going to go about starting now that we have guitar rig and superior drummer and all that. The first stop I'd like to make is to the tempo. We can just type in here what we want the speed or the tempo of the song to be. So maybe we want it to be 150, a little faster. We can also tap tempo by moving the mouse up here and tapping to the beat. Click here, we can also change the time signature. Maybe we want to be cool and do 5/4 and trip everyone up. And say I'm ready to record. So all we need now is a metronome, because if you don't record with a metronome, you're just wasting your own time. So we've got a lot of options here. A lot of them are self-explanatory, but we can't assume anything in a tutorial. So the metronome volume, I like to put mine a bit louder than the actual volume of the instruments, otherwise I'm just not going to be playing on time. So I'm going to turn on the metronome volume to whatever. We can mess around with it. I always have it during recording, because otherwise, we're just going to have a bad time. Now, count in before recording is going to let it count in this number of measures. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to begin wherever our cursor wanted us to start. So, if I clicked, say here, it'll probably start playing back from the 1 and the 2. And to make sure it plays back, which I think is a very important thing, is click the pre-roll before recording. And that way it'll go back this number, or 2 numbers and measures, and then we're going to get a good head start. Once you're ready for that, then let's just watch what happens. See, it's counting backwards, just like we wanted to. So that's essentially how that's going to work. Now, everything else is going to get tied together to one track. That's called your master track, and that's what's been sitting over here on the left side. Now, there's a couple aspects of this guy that I think are important. Everything is going into this master track at some point, but when I think of everything, I think these main subs, because that's what all these guys are connected to. So once we're mixing for our final song, you want to just be messing with the volumes of each of these and balancing it out to your liking. There's no real right answer. I always generally keep the drums the loudest. That's the one golden rule that I really maintain. Now, what you want to look at here is also that the master track has an effects track, because we can add different plugins to, master the track. In that process, we can add equalization, multiband compression, stereo imaging. We can add a volume limiter, all sorts of different things that you want on top of your entire track. And heck, you can even have different sort of sends going towards this master track, like one with just reverb. I also enjoy this mono button, because it lets you hear the song as mono, as if it were coming out of like a phone. Just another perspective. You could pan it, which I probably wouldn't do, and of course you could mute the whole thing. This is the meter that you're going to be watching for your volumes. If things get really loud in the mix and you just really have to lower it, then you can lower the entire mix before it goes into the output, which is your, I guess, mastered, if you're gonna do that process in here. The last thing I want to go over is automation. So say you want to automate something, the hotkey is V. Why don't we just go ahead and show our master track on this big ol' recording board. So if we look at our master track, and hopefully you guys saw how I brought it up, we could maybe we want to fade it in. So what we can do is start at nothing, or sometimes you might want to start lower. Let's just start at nothing, and then say I want it to be at full volume here. So I can hold shift and click here to create what's called an envelope point, and then we can just bring this up to 0, or you could right click and set the exact point. And all you have to do is just keep clicking, and everything snaps to the time here, so you're always in good shape there. And we can also go to the end, and we could fade it out just like that, and that's all there really is to it. Now when you're making a song and you want to render it, all you have to do is type in your song name, and you can pick a different kind of things you want to do. We could select certain tracks in here, and then we could get their stems, which would be like their output, and the render bounds could be specific times, or you could just do the entire project, which is generally like up till where the volume's 0 and there's absolutely no sound. Or you could just do like time selection. You give it a name, you can give it a sample rate. We're sticking to 44/100, stereo of course. Now the resample mode, I've always ended up sticking with this one. I know they say slow, but my computer's pretty decent. Now the output, we can do WAV, we can do AIFF, which are lossless, or we can do MP3, and hopefully that'll be it. Now you guys definitely go give my template a try and make your own out of it, because this is literally just not enough on its own to stand. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this tutorial. I really hope you guys start using Reaper and enjoying it. If you prefer it to your DAW, if you enjoyed Reaper, leave it in the comments. And if you make any project using my template and want me to check it out, I'd be more than happy to. Thanks, and happy recording.